Hey everyone, welcome back to Craps University, your go-to source for mastering the game of craps. Today, we're going to also talk about something very controversial, and that is dice control. If you ask me personally, I do think that dice control can get some repeated benefit, but there are so many variables involved when you're throwing the dice um, that I have a hard time. I have a hard time seeing that somebody could consistently pull this off. Um, it might give them a little bit of an edge, but I don't know that it would allow somebody to become extremely wealthy playing craps. Um, so dice control, let's define it really. So dice control is the idea that a shooter can influence the outcome of a craps roll through a specific technique. And some of those techniques are the grip, the setting, the toss, in a repeatable way. And the goal is to reduce the randomness and increase your chances in rolling favorable numbers. It's not about cheating or loaded dice. That's a whole different topic where you're loading the dice. Basically, you're taking what is given to you by the casino and you have practiced hours to perfect your throw to try to reduce the randomness. So I call this diamond backing. It's rubber, um, and you feel it. It's a little, it's hard rubber, but it's a little soft and forgiving. Um, Somebody that's controlling dice wants, the rule of throwing dice is you need to hit the back wall. What does that mean? A hard roll? Or do you just need to touch it? So I like sometimes when I throw, some people will just really throw them down, randomize what you're getting. But I think if you're trying to hit in this area, kind of so they bounce up and hit the underside, you're still hitting the back, okay? But it's hitting the underside, so that's an advantage, but it's very tough. I'm throwing from basically where in between the dealer and the box man. So my throws are not very long range throws. So it's going to be hard when I go to demonstrate this. So the theory behind it is the set, okay? How are you setting the dice? And the most popular set, and I see this all the time, they call this the 3V set. You put the 3 and it makes a V. That's a very popular set. You got acey-deucey, you got the hard 8 underneath, you've got yo on one side, and you've got yo pointing out. So that's a very popular set, and I see it all the time at the casino. So the next is the grip. You hold the dice the same, and the most popular grip is they take 3 fingers and somehow they're pinching it like that, so it's very solid grip. And then the toss. Like I said earlier, when I throw, I like to hit in here. If you hit here, you get a bounce into that. It's really hard to control. But if you're closer to the wall, you're still hitting the wall, hopefully just touching the wall. And if it comes up, it's going to hit the underside of that. So in a nutshell, that's kind of how it is, right? So you have a set, a grip, and a toss. Those are the three components of a throw. But there's a problem, right? So casinos aren't dumb. They require you to hit this back wall. That is a requirement to throw it. You know, you might throw a short roll. They might let it play, but they'll warn you, hey, you got to hit the back. If you consistently do this, they'll start calling no roll. And I've seen that also happen. Sometimes it's by accident. You know, I've thrown dice before and one gets left behind and, you know, you get kind of scolded for it and you're like, well, that's the way it is. Some players believe that dice control is not only real, but it's beatable. And those are people that practice this. They build setups specifically to throw the dice repeatedly over and over and over again. You can't get practice at a casino. I mean, they're watching you like a hawk. But when you have a setup, you know, here at my house where I have this table, I could probably practice over and over. Is it worth putting in that time for me? No, because craps is entertainment to me. I win, I lose, but it's entertainment. Going to casinos just in general, I love casinos, but just entering a casino and not gambling is entertainment. You know, I people watch. It's a good time. So there's many books that mention names. You know, Stanford Wong, Frank Scobley, Dominic Lorigo, The Dominator. So there are groups that put on workshops about dice control, and some players swear by it. A player like me, I like to set dice, I like to throw the same way. That's different. They're taking it and trying to get an advantage. And if you could lower the house edge by a little bit, I think that's an advantage that you're looking for. Let's just say on 10 rolls, you'll be able to repeat it twice. That's definitely an advantage for the shooter. So what do casinos think? I think casinos like it. You know, it's not banned. It's not a banned activity because the casinos are very smart. They know that repeating this over and over is extremely hard to do. They allow it. They want others to try it. But here's the catch. If you start winning consistently and you're using what seems like a dice control technique, and I've seen this before, the boxman will say, change your throw or leave the table. It's just as easy as that. So they got to change your throw. You might change your set, you know. It's pretty easy to comply. And think about this. If you're slowing things down on the table, they'll also ask you to change your throw because it's taking you too long to throw the dice. But somebody that's good at dice control, they're not a one-trick pony. They don't have just one throw. They probably have many sets, many throws. They practice things in many ways. So Usually dice controllers, the spot next to the stick man or behind that spot are prime areas for somebody to use dice control. Yes, these are for more like beginner, intermediate players that are wanting to throw the dice, but there's an advantage to standing here. And I see it all the time. You know, the people that consistently making points, long rolls, they're standing right along here. Okay, so does it work? Well, it depends on what you mean by work. If you mean I'm going to roll the same number every time, absolutely not. That does not work. But do you gain the mathematical edge over the casino or increase your status and lower the house edge? That's what we mean by it works. You're not going to be able to roll the same number over and over again, or the casino would have it banned. And you know, most players are not going to do this. They're not going to be able to do it because they're not as disciplined. You know, this takes hours, weeks, months, years to develop a strategy for dice control. You know, you're not going to be able to practice a week and go out and say you're an expert at dice control. I really doubt that, because I've tried to throw the same. It's very difficult. So what is the cost of mastery, right? So you've got to practice, you've got to purchase a practice rig, the dice, a slow motion camera, because you're going to need to be able to watch what you're doing to change the way that you might throw, the way you might grip, the way you might set. That slow motion camera, that's money. So a practice rig to simulate a craps table, this would make do. This is probably the closest thing to a casino crap table. It's not perfect, but it's doing the job for me. A pair of quality dice. These dice I bought from a casino supply store. I ordered them online from Vegas. They're Razor Edge. They have a serial number on them. And I bought quite a few pairs, and they're not cheap. They're about, for five, they're about $8. So that seems very expensive for some dice. So let's try this. The high-speed camera, you're going to have to film yourself for hours. You're going to have to watch that film. So there's a time. As I mentioned, I'm a software engineer. Time is valuable to me. Watching videos of myself throwing dice, I don't think I could do that, because I now in my life equate every hour to getting paid at work. What does that mean? You know, because contracting, doing projects, everything is kind of, how long is it going to take you to write that code? I've done projects for people outside of my full-time job, and there's an hourly rate associated. So hours of recording, hours of watching, probably not ideal. So let's try some stuff, okay? And let's see, and we'll try to decide on a verdict. Let's hear your verdict in the comments as well. If you think that dice controls BS, let's hear it. I'm not a believer. I do think it can give somebody a little bit of an edge, but if you could lower the house edge by 10%, I think that's a winner. So I'm going to use the classic V3, and we are going to throw these Classic V3 means you got a hard 8 on the bottom. And I'm going to try to toss these in the same manner. All right. No field 5. All right. So I'm just going to throw a little marker out there for every roll. 8. Easy 8. Actually, we hit a 5. Six. Easy 6. Six. Easy 6. Aces. Now, did you see how I hit very low and those dice just kind of froze right there? I'm going to throw that lammer here on that 2. Anything that's not a box number, we'll place out there. Okay. And plus, this will give us the number of throws we get. 10. Easy. Eight. Easy 8. Seven out. All right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We should see, so we had 7 numbers that we hit, but we know by the dice combinations, you should see a 7 1 and 6 times. So that was an average roll. Nothing special. We rolled the 6 twice, the 8 twice, which also makes sense because if there's 6 ways to roll a 7, there's 5 ways to roll a 6 and an 8. A 5 showed up, a 10, and aces showed up. So we should see aces 1 out of 36 rolls. So this showed up early, but we'd probably never see it again. So that's just a little demonstration. There's no scientific information that I had in my roll. But, you know, just using some random, there's a 10. I'm just randomly throwing. There's a yo. There's a 9. So that's 3 numbers. There's a yo again. Only 2 ways to roll that yo. There's a 3 craps 3. There's a hard 10. That's two 10s, 2 11s, and a 3. And those are not the most common numbers. There's an 8. There's a 6. I've lost count, but I know this is many more. There's an 8 again. There's an 8 another time. So all the pressers, there's a 4. There's an 8 again. I think that's 4 8s now. There's another 10. That's 3 10s, 2 11s. That's another 11. It's 3 11s. That's 7 out. Okay? So, randomness versus pseudo dice control. What's the verdict? Me, the randomness, I think, helped me. I prefer more random. If you see me pick up and you'll hear me shake, that's just some randomization. But yeah, we hit some numbers way on the outside that I'm surprised about. But, you know, my opinion is I think dice control can benefit, but it's very difficult, takes a lot of practice and dedication to it. So dice control is fascinating. It's a blend of physics, psychology, and muscle memory. So that's another thing, the muscle memory of throwing. And you know, that's very difficult. I'm 6'4". I've got long arms, so it's not compact, my throws. But for most players, it's more a ritual than a result. So I totally did it random, probably doubled the number of rolls than we did trying to do dice control. If you're just looking for to play craps in a smart way, focus on strategies to reduce the house edge. And we've talked about strategies, iron cross, 3-point dolly, you name it, we're going to cover it. But the strategies, I think, are time to learn the strategies instead of trying to invest in dice control. But I could be wrong. I'm not a dice control expert. But if you love that idea of mastering your toss and chasing your long-term edge, then go for it, right? Just because I did this little demo and it kind of put a verdict on things, doesn't mean that you shouldn't try if you want to. So if you like what you're learning, like what you're watching, put a comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and we have more content coming. Thanks for watching. Craps University out.